Good afternoon, and thank you all so much for joining us for How to Achieve Career Clarity. Every person is unique, and no two UMAP profiles are the same. UMAP offers a foundation for you to thrive. In this presentation, explore how UMAP can help you achieve career clarity by revealing the four key pillars that drive your priorities, your beliefs, your motivations, and your interests. And this is all led by career coach Shelly Piedmont, who's the founder of Career GPS LLC. As an HR professional for over 20 years, Shelly has read thousands of resumes, looked at countless LinkedIn profiles, and interviewed candidates for everything from entry-level hourly positions to senior leadership. As someone who has worked in the trenches, she knows a thing or two about how to market yourself to a hiring team. I again want to thank the Friends of the Library for sponsoring. So all 70 plus of us who are watching live and the many more that will watch the recording, let's give a big virtual round of applause to Shelly for joining us this afternoon. And Shelly, you can take it away. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you, Robert. Thank you, Friends of the Library. And thank you all for spending an hour today on your Monday listening to me and learning about UMAP, as well as the people that will watch on the replay. I really do appreciate it. And I want to start by telling you a personal story about career clarity for me. So I was a senior in college, and I didn't really know what I was going to be doing. I ended up being a major in economics, not because I particularly had a passion in economics. I had two reasons for choosing that major. One, it was sort of business-ish, and I thought that would be helpful. The second was it was in the College of Arts and Sciences, which meant I could take classes all through that college. I loved literature. I liked art history. I liked sociology. I was taking all sorts of other courses and figured, okay, that this will work for me. So when I was a senior, I didn't know what I was going to do next. And my academic advisor said, well, why don't you think about being an economist for the government? And I said, okay, why not? It's as good as anything. My parents were thrilled at the idea because they liked the idea of it being a stable job. So I moved to Washington, D.C. to be an economist. And 6 months into this job, I was like, oh no, this job was not a fit for me at all. Now, there were people in my organization who loved this job, but it did not sit well with me. It felt so wrong for who I was. And not that there was anything wrong with the job. It's just that for me, it was not very stimulating. I didn't feel like I was using my skills. And honestly, it was sort of boring. And so 6 months in, I decide, oh, I can't make this my life career. I have to reinvent myself, think about something else. Well, it ended up taking me 2 years to figure out what that next step would be for me. I realized I needed a job that had way more interaction with people, that I had more autonomy in what I did. And I ended up deciding to go to the hospitality industry, of all things, very different. And I ended up in HR leadership roles. Now, had we had UMAP back then, it really wouldn't have taken me 2 years to figure that out. I would have been able to understand myself better. I would have ignored what other people were telling me that I should do, because oftentimes they do that based on what is important to them or what interests them without looking at the person and what they really need. And so then with all that information, I could have figured out probably much sooner what that next best step would be for me. So this is just to tell you that UMAP actually can be really helpful in terms of speeding up that process to be able to figure out your career clarity, what makes sense for you, and where it would be where you can thrive. I'm all about thriving in your job. So today we're going to talk about what UMAP is and the components of that so you can understand a little bit of more about how this process actually works. So let's talk about the 4 pillars that are so important for UMAP. Now, oftentimes I think people are told, oh, follow your passion. Okay, well, I know that lots of people don't have a passion, or they have more than one passion, right? But even if you follow your passion, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be in the right jobs because there's so much more than that. So that's what UMAP does. It actually helps you understand all the components of you that are important for career clarity. Okay, so on this slide, we have the 4 pillars. Okay, so first thing we think about are your strengths. Okay, those are your natural talents. Those are the things you are born with that you do better than everybody else. The second thing we look at is values. And I can tell you back when I was starting my first job, no one ever talked about values, like what was important to you. But now we know that that's extremely important. And when values are not aligned with your role or your job, that can be very difficult. We also talk about preferred skills. Some things we like to do, some things we don't. So we'll dive a little bit more into that. And then, of course, your personality. We are all different. We have different characteristics, traits, interests. So we need to know a little bit about that to understand what the best path might be. So we're going to go through all 4 of these today as we talk about UMAP. So let's start with pillar 1, and that is your strengths. Okay, we call that the how. That's the how you work. Okay, and pillar 1, the strengths, we actually want to understand more about kind of all aspects of strengths because they come in various varieties. Okay, so this is about 4 areas: relationships, influencing, getting stuff done, and all that mind work. So we're all different in those ways. So that explains how we work. So UMAP uses something called the Clifton Strengths, or some people know that as Strengths Finders. That's what it used to be called. And I love this assessment because it concentrates on the things that you do really well, right? And when you are working in your strengths, you're engaged, you are productive. You can usually be more productive than the people around you. And I always love this part. When you are happy, the people around you are happy. That means partners, spouses, children, parents, siblings. When you are feeling good about your work, they feel good for you. And you're not taking the angst of work home with you or having to have, kind of, uh, you know, give all your feelings and emotions to them because you need to get that out. So that's why that's important. Okay, so we're going to talk about all 4 of these areas of strengths. Okay, so the first one we're going to talk about are the relating themes, and this falls in the category of outward facing strengths. So relating themes are themes where there's one-on-one interaction. Okay, and people do that in many different ways. So I give the example here of an includer. If that's one of your strengths, includers are always looking at Who else should they include in the team, in the party, in whatever, because they know that there's some people who might be marginalized or they're just quieter and they're not necessarily going to raise their hand. And so those people bring them in. That is how they build relationships. But there's many ways to build relationships. You could be somebody who's very empathetic. You could be somebody who is wanting harmony, or you could be somebody who is really focused on everybody's individuality. There's many ways to do this. There's no right or wrong way, but knowing what could be in your strengths bucket in the area of relationship building is very important. So that is one of the domains, relating themes. The next one is influencing themes. This is actually not one-to-one, but one-to-many. So we'll put 5 up there, one-to-many. And there's many ways that you can influence others. I give the example here of somebody who we would call a maximizer. A maximizer looks at taking something good and making it great. And they bring people along with them on that journey to make things great. But there's other ways to influence. I think we traditionally think of salespeople and how they woo people, winning others over. You could do it by being very competitive and bringing people along with you in that competition. So there's many ways to do it. Knowing if you have this influencing strengths and what they are can be very helpful for choosing a career. So these are 2 outward-facing strengths. The inward-facing strengths are those things that are more inside of you, okay? Don't relate to other people. So we have executing themes as one bucket. And this, as I said, is the get stuff done. People of strengths in this area are people that you know will get their work done and they are very reliable. So I have responsibility as an example of one of the strengths that is in this area. People who have this strength because they are responsible. If they say they are going to do something, they will do it. It doesn't matter if it's going to take 40, 80, 100 hours. If they've said it, they will do it. Okay. But there's other people, other strengths in this area. So some people can have, another one would be achievers. Achievers, because they're so focused on achieving their goals, they get stuff done because of that. Now, there's also people who have focus. And because they're just so single-minded, if you give them something, they're just going to concentrate on that. They get stuff done. So there's many ways to execute. And the Clifton Strengths can help you identify if you have these top strengths in this area. Then we'll go on to the last one here, which is thinking themes. Okay, so this is all the brain work. And so there's lots of different ways that you can have strengths. So I give the example here of futuristic, and those are people who are always thinking about the future. What's going to be happening 6 months from now, a year from now, 5 years, maybe 50 years. Okay, so their brain is set up so that they're always thinking ahead. Okay, now we also have in this theme bucket people with context, and those people sort of look the other way, which is they're looking at the past to understand the present. Okay, so that's just another way of thinking. Or we have strategists, and so they're always thinking of things in terms of the strategy. Okay, now I mentioned a lot of strengths here. There's no strength that is better than other strengths. what it is knowing which you have, and we always focus on your top 5, and then know which themes they fall into. It doesn't mean if you have a theme here, like thinking themes, and you don't have any of your strengths in the top 5, that that's bad. There's many ways to be successful. But what it does mean is you should lean into roles, careers, whatever it is, that it's going to allow you to use the strengths that you have in your top 5. That's where the key is, because again, they're natural. You do it better than others. So, one of the things you can ask yourself when it comes to strengths in pillar 1 is, what strengths do I naturally gravitate to in my daily or weekly work? So if you want to kind of get an idea of strengths, think about that. That might help you on the path to identifying your strengths. So that is pillar number 1. Now let's go to pillar number 2. Pillar number 2 is your values. That's your why. It is what gets us up in the morning, keeps us going, and our why is very important. Now, one thing about values is some people have core values that are with them through their entire life. But you can have values that change depending upon what season of your life you are in. So if you have a young family and you know that you need to raise your family, your values might change a little bit than if you are older and you're an empty nester. But there probably are some that are going to be core with you. So it's important to know what those values are. So I'll give you some examples of values. Loyalty could be a value. Fame can be a value. Creativity, authenticity, meaningful work, trust, fun. All of those can be values. And just because you have those values doesn't mean other people have the same values. That's why I always tell people, be very careful when you're getting advice from people, because often they will give you advice based on their values, but they may not be your values. I give the example at the beginning. My parents had security as a value because they were entrepreneurs and they had ups and downs with their business. And so for me, they thought that was important, though I did not have that value and I've never had that value. So things that were important to them or they thought would be important to me were not. Okay. Now, when we talk about values, it's important, one, to define your values, because how I define a value and how you define a value may be different, even though we say we have the same value. So that's one thing we do with UMAP. The second thing we do is, once we've identified values, is we want to go through and determine if they are reciprocal values. Not every value you have, you are expecting others to give back to you. Okay, so as an example, some people have the value of spirituality, but they may not say that an employer has to give that back or that employer needs to be a spiritual organization. That is something that they may just want on their own. But there are many values that they will want to have the employer embody. Trust, for example. If you have that as an important value, then yes, you're going to demand trust back from your organization. So that's an important thing. Now, as I look at those people who are having difficult time with their current employer, one of the exercises I do with them is when we determine if a value is reciprocal, and then we also will look at what levels of the organization are you potentially aligned with in that value or not. So are you getting it back? So we would look at whether the content of the job aligns with your values. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Are the people you're interacting with, your team or your boss, are they reciprocating that value? And the organization itself, the culture, is that reciprocating the value? If we find that it is not, and as an example, I have a client currently who has decided that her organization does not reciprocate the value of respect, which is very important to her. So she now has to decide what she wants to do. She's very close to getting her pension. And so whether she can stay for the few years to get that pension, even though that value is being violated, or does she need to go somewhere else? So those are some things that looking at this can bring to a person's attention. And you can then look at what's important and what you're willing to deal with and things that you're not. Okay, so this is pillar 2, values. Now let's go on to pillar number 3. Oh, I'm sorry. Before we do that, questions to ask yourself. So you can ask, what are the core values that guide my life or career? And start writing those down as you think of values. Oftentimes, we don't really think about this part of career clarity and career happiness, but it's exceedingly important. I liken it to if your values are violated, when you finish a day's work, often you feel dirty. And it's almost like you need to take a shower to wipe that dirt off of you every day because it is coating you and makes you feel unclean. So think about that. Now we'll go on to the next one, which is skills. Okay, so this is the what. So we've talked about how you do the work, why you do the work, and skills is about the what of the work. And in this area, we look at motivating skills and we look at burnout skills. And let me talk a little bit about the difference. So skills actually are learned or developed abilities, okay? Different from strengths. Strengths are innate, you're usually born with them. But your strengths are, but your skills are things that we learn over time. And it's either because jobs require it, we've learned it through school, maybe volunteer work, or maybe just on our own, we have decided that that's something that's important for us to learn. Now, usually, a lot of times your skills will align with your strengths because that's of interest to you. So if you have a strength, let's say of ideation, you come up with ideas all the time, then you probably have very strong conceptual skills. And likely there are things that you really like to do. But you can also have skills that are not aligned with your strengths. I'll give an example. Maybe you grew up in a household where there is not a lot of empathy. So it's not a strength of yours, you realize that. But because it's important to you, you have worked to develop empathy. So it can be a motivating skill for you, and you could actually do that well, even though you have to work on it. Now, the difference between motivating skills and burnout skills is that with motivating skills, when you see that you get to use that skill during your workday or even in your private life, you are excited. It lights you up. You're like, good, I get to do this. I love to do this. That's motivating. On the flip side, burnout skills are those that you could do very well. Like people will notice that, yeah, you do this particular type of work or this skill great. You might often get more work in that area because people notice that you do it well, but it doesn't excite you. It actually burns you out. If you have to do those skills over and over again and for long periods of time, you are exhausted mentally. You come home from work, or if you're working from home, you're just like, I am so tired. My brain is exhausted. I can't do anything else but just kind of sit here and just kind of take it easy, give my brain a rest. That's because you are using the burnout skills. Okay. I give an example for myself. One of my burnout skills is analysis. Now, doesn't mean I can't analyze things, and I do analyze things. But I know, because it's a burnout skill for me, that I don't like to take on a lot of it. And I do it for shorter periods of time. Often in my work, I have the luxury that if I have to do a lot of analysis, I can usually delegate it to somebody else to do it for me, because I know that that's a burnout skill for me. I would rather spend my time on motivating skills, because those are things that I enjoy. Okay. Now, why is this important in careers, in job search? Well, you can look at a job description and you can look at what the skills are that they're asking to be used. And if you know your motivating skills and your burnout skills, then you can judge whether a role actually will be good because it will use the majority of your motivating skills, or are you going to be burned out because you're using a majority of burnout skills? Okay, so this is additional information that is very, very helpful in terms of determining why maybe a job is not working for you, maybe because you're using a lot of burnout skills. And when you're looking at careers, what kind of careers would allow you to use more of your motivating skills? So that is important. So, question to ask yourself: what skills do you use that energize you? So think about your day or week, and what do you get to do that you go, yay, yay, I get to do this. This is fun. I enjoy this. And what do you get to do that you go kind of big sigh. Okay, I guess I have to do this. Think about that. That will be helpful for you in determining jobs that are a good fit and those that are not. Okay, so that is our pillar number 3. So let's then go to pillar number 4. Okay, so this is personality. So I call this how you are wired, because we are wired all differently. That's the great thing about us humans. We're all a little bit different. And our personality-based interests go into different areas. Okay. And so from a career perspective, it helps to know what your personality type is, because then you can look at careers that kind of fall in that area. Now, what UMAP does a little bit differently is we take some common personality types and then we combine different levels of interest, because we're not just solely focused on one thing. Humans are pretty complex. So we can have multiple interests. That's why it's really helpful when we understand our personalities and what they mean, to know what, when you combine different interests, what that possibly could mean. So there are 6 different types of personality buckets, themes that are important. So we're going to go through them just so you can have an understanding. Okay, they're the doer, the thinker, the creator, the helper, the persuader, and the organizer. Okay. So let's look at the first one here. Realistic types. Okay, that realist. They are the doers. Okay, they're the people that love to work with their hands. They want to, at the end of the day, have something tangible that they can say, I've done this. Okay, so as I say here, practical, hands-on solutions to problems. So let's give an example of what those types of occupations might be. You can think of EMTs, firefighters, electricians, plumbers, security guards, maybe environmental engineers. Those sorts of occupations can fall nicely into that realistic type, those doers. Okay, so if that was your number one, that could be helpful for you to kind of understand where your interests lie. Okay, now the next area, the next type, we're calling those investigative types. Okay, for shorthand, we call them thinkers. Okay, they solve problems, they are interested in challenges. Okay, they're they want to spend all day just kind of thinking about how to fix things, how to change things, etc. Okay, examples of people in this type of personality type and what jobs might be good for them is people that are doing forensics, for example, and maybe medical examiners, people like that who are trying to figure out, okay, how did this person pass away? Scientists who are working in laboratories and they're trying different types of experiments to see, what works, what doesn't work. Those could be the investigative types as well. Okay, so that's just an example of that person, that personality type. The next one is creators. Okay, and I got 2 children who are creators, and I knew that from the beginning because they were extremely imaginative. They were coming up with all kinds of different ideas, creativity. My kids, when they were little, they were making movies and plays and doing art and all sort of things. So I knew, fell into this particular type. Okay, so people in creatives, it doesn't have to be that they are in the arts specifically, but they're just creative people, and that shows very well in kind of their interests. So we can have people like artists for sure, but you could have sound engineers, you could have architects, you could have authors, writers, even technical writers could be creative depending on what they're doing. So those creative types, they usually need some sort of occupation for that creative outlet that they have. And certainly a organization that is going to support that. Because one thing for creators, if they can't create, if they are told no, that's a significant problem for them. Our next type, okay, these are the social types. They are the helpers, okay? They want to help their fellow man and make a difference. And so we see them in our communities all the time. We've got educators. Those fall into helpers. We've got, people in health sciences. They're helpers oftentimes, doctors, nurses, technicians, people like that. And they want to, their whole thing is, how can I help others? So that's a particular type, one that we see quite often. The next one is the enterprising ones. Okay, so enterprising, they are the persuaders. and they like to make decisions. They like autonomy, and they are also the people that like to get the projects going and make sure they get done. Okay. I am an enterprising type, and part of my issue with that job that I had first out of college is I couldn't make any decisions, hardly any, and I couldn't be, start projects or really anything. It was very just do this, do this, do this. For this type, which is me, that was just all wrong for me. So what are people in this particular type roles? What do they kind of gravitate? Well, we see business executives, senior leaders, the CEO, COO, head of marketing, head of whatever. They tend to fall in this type. Don't have to, because there's many ways to be successful, but they do tend to fall into this. As an HR leader, that's what I kind of moved into, and my kind of change from that. This is typical for the type of leader. That type of leader would be in this persuader category. Okay, and then the last one we have here, these are the conventional types. These are the organizers. We call them the glue of the organization. They are all about structure, process, and order. They keep things going. Okay. Now, I don't want people, if they feel like, oh, that's me, to take anything negative from saying they're conventional types, because it's just a way of phrasing kind of that personality. But there's nothing bad, wrong. All society needs conventional types, because they're the people that help put a lot of the ideas and the creativity and even helping others into a context, a structure, so that that can happen. So that's really important. So who falls into this type of role? Well, it can be like loan officers. It can be people in insurance claims, security analysts, financial analysts. Those would be typically what we might find in this category. So let me just talk about UMAP, because we take a primary type and we take a secondary type, and we kind of look at it through that lens. So as an example, I told you that I'm enterprising. That's my primary. But my secondary is investigative. So what does that mean? Well, you put those together, and we are the strategists. We love to come up with strategy. And some of my best jobs were when I had been given latitude to decide, okay, this is your baby, you decide how to do it. That was good for me. I was so happy. But you can combine different types, and it can lead to different areas. So if someone was a persuader, but they were of the secondary was conventional, maybe they would be really good as the owner of an insurance company. That conventional, that would really be attuned to insurance. The persuader would be the ownership part. Or let's say enterprising and creative. You combine those together, maybe that would, a good role for that person would be a producer in some sort of entertainment field. So that's why I think UMAP is really helpful, because it can help just define things a little bit more, give you a little bit more direction on some of this. So things you can ask yourself: what are you doing when you lose track of time? And that sometimes is a good indicator when you think about, well, what are you into that happens to you? That can give you some ideas about your personality-based interests. So when we look at all these 4 pillars, we know that when you combine some of them, it can make it really powerful and give you some really good ideas of kind of how you operate. So as an example, we take pillar 1 and pillar 2. That's the how and the why. And if we look at that, we know that strengths get expressed through our values. That's just how we look at the world. So I'll give you an example to kind of illustrate this. Maybe your strength is individualization. Now that's a relationship building strength. But you have community as one of your values. So strengths expressed through values in this example could be your focus on building community of diverse individuals. You see that individuality and you want to build communities around that. That is very unique to you. It can be of value to others, and it can lead you to understanding what types of roles and organizations will want that and where you can really thrive. So that's pillar 1 and 2. Pillar 3 and 4, we know that our interests, our personality-based interests, are expressed through our skills. So let me give an example of that. Maybe your personality-based interest is in the social or helping realm, but you have a motivating strength of conceptualization, coming up with all different concepts. So how you express that is you seek innovative solutions that can benefit others. That's your driving force. So if you can find organizations or roles that do that, you could be extremely happy. So this is how the 4 pillars all work together to provide that clarity. So you know yourself, you know what works for you, and then you can go out and try to find roles, organizations that will align with what you bring that is unique to you. So as I end, here is my information, my email, my website. I also have the website of UMAP, that organization. It's www.myumap.com. If you want to go to that site, you can purchase a UMAP from them. It's very easy instructions on the website. And if you would like me to actually help you to analyze your own UMAP, I do something called a UMAP mini debrief. And if you attend today, you can use the code here. This QR code will go to the site, and you can put Tewksbury in there, and you will get 20% off of that service. So I'm going to open it up to questions.
So folks, let's give Shelley a big virtual round of applause for a great presentation. And let's take up to 12 minutes of questions because Robert has to do a hard stop by 3 o'clock. All right, so Josephine asks, does one always fall into one type or multiple types?
I'm not quite sure when you say type, which one of the pillars you're referring to.
Yeah, sorry, Josephine. If you could clarify, I can't tell at what point that was. Oh, that was asked at 2:43. Shelley, can you remember at 2:43
Okay, so
what
that
slide you were showing?
probably, yeah, that was the personality-based interests. I think we wrapped up with that one. So we do look at your top 2 personality-based interests, and using the 2 of them together, we can come up with some ideas of how that could work together. I'll give an example. My son, I mentioned that I have 2 and they're both creative, but their secondary personality type is different. So my oldest is creative and investigative. That is his interest. And so honestly, for him, he is less into the actual physical making of art, but in investigating creativity or articles. So as an example, he was looking at museum archivist, for example, as a job because it would be in the creative field, but it would be investigating different works that come into a museum. They get so many different types of things and the origin of it and where it belongs and how to catalog it and things like that. So that's how you can combine the two.
Shelley, we have a couple of folks asking if you could go back a few slides and show that QR code again. And as a reminder, folks, you'll also get the recording via email, but some people may want to scan it now. So we'll leave it on this slide. Let's see, Josephine, thanks you for the answer. Mark asks, do we take the Clifton Strength Finder first and then take those results to UMAP?
Okay, so I get this question a lot because some people are very familiar with Clifton Strengths and they may have taken it. What we suggest for UMAP is when you pay for a UMAP, you will get a code to take the Clifton Strengths. Now, it is suggested that if you haven't taken it within the last year, that you retake it. And the reason is because your top strengths don't change, but the order of them can change because it depends on how much you're using them or not using them based upon your current circumstances. So yeah, so we would suggest anything that is more than a year, it is best to retake it. And the Clifton's and UMAP, when you purchase a UMAP, it will include the code to go to Clifton Strengths and take that.
So Mary says, thank you. Ellen says, excellent presentation. Thank you so much. Nancy says, can you spell Clifton Strengths? Where do I find it? Can you put the prior slide up with Shelley's email and contact info? You want to go one slide back again, Shelley?
Yeah, I sure will.
How are we
go.
spelling Clifton Strengths? And can you just clarify? I think you kind of just answered it, but where can we find it?
Okay, so Clifton Strengths is part of the Gallup organization. So you can put in your browser Clifton Strengths and it will come up. I'm trying to remember exactly the URL. It starts with Gallup. I don't know if it's just Gallup or gallup.cliftonstrengths.com. Can't remember, but get Clifton Strengths. It is CLIFTON Strengths, STRENGHTS, and it is one word.
Let's see here. Josephine asks, how can you integrate your pillars during an interview for the tell me about yourself or the walk through your resume questions?
That is a great question because I also, as a career coach, teach interview prep, and that is the one thing we always work on is how to bring that in because it is a unique thing to you that other candidates do not have. And it is really helpful to explain not only because in an interview you talk about what you've done, but they also want to know about how. And so you can start explaining the how of I do all these things, and that's because, well, you don't even have to say UMAP, you know it, but you can just explain it to them that I have these strengths. I have these motivating skills. This is my personality. These are my values. And this is how I incorporate it into the work that I do. So the tell me about yourself is a good place to do that. Because you can start by putting that out there about who you are. And you can, in your answers, I tell people is, okay, they ask a question, tell me about a time you had to deal with conflict, something of that sort. And then what you can do is answer that and use your UMAP to explain how you do it, because you might do it differently than others based upon your strengths, your skills, your values, or your personality-based interests. But you can then explain it in a way I feel that is more compelling to the interviewer, because when you explain how you approach it, then they can see you doing that. And I think that is really powerful and something that most of your competition cannot do.
So Linda writes, I have heard you need to periodically take this test because of life changes, such as the death of a spouse or other life bombs that change you. And Shelley, did you say that people should take this test once a year?
No, I don't think it's necessary to do that, though there is true that if you have a life event happening to you, that it can change some of the things in the UMAP. When you have some sort of trauma, lots of times your values can change because of that. So it could be helpful to just be aware of where you are now with that. But last time I did my UMAP was 3 years ago, pretty much, I think it was 3 years. And I look at what I have here. Could it possibly have changed? Maybe a little bit, but it's pretty, I can tell. And just also because I'm a certified coach, it hasn't changed that much. So I think for most people, getting it done at least once is extremely helpful. And then also, I would say, something is going on with you and you think you might want to kind of recheck, that might be a good thing too.
So an anonymous attendee says, how does the methodology identify strengths and skills when the user may feel beaten down and defeated by the job search? And do those kind of circumstances impact your UMAP? Let's just say, does that impact your UMAP?
The assessment, so there are 4 assessments you take. One is a Clifton Strengths, which we talked about, but there's 3 others that you do. They should be somewhat independent of kind of where you are in your life and what is going on with that. Now, I will say that will it have an influence? Could it? Yeah, it could. Okay. And that would be also something that a coach could really help you and kind of discover what is going on as well. I have had people who have, for example, the Clifton Strengths, they have had adaptability become one of their higher strengths. And part of that has been just because of what they perceive as their circumstances and having to be adaptable. Because, this gentleman was unemployed. And so, but as we talked about it, we could kind of unpack that a little bit more and kind of what that means. How much of that did he perceive to be innate to him? And how much of it did he think kind of rose and towards importance because of his circumstances?
All right, folks, it is almost 3 o'clock. I think we're going to start to wind things down. Nenji said thank you. Let's see, I think I missed some thank yous. Ellen said, excellent presentation. Thank you so much, as does Mary. Nancy says, thanks for a great presentation and all of this information. So folks, let's give Shelley one last virtual round of applause. Shelley, any last words for the audience?
Oh, I just want to thank you so much for your time today. As you probably can tell, I feel very strongly about this tool and people using it. Too many people don't know about it. And it just is a really great help. And I'm going to add, I focus on careers, but this is a great tool also just to understand yourself just in general. And many people find that if they do it with a partner, that they because they can see each other's, that they have a more understanding of that person and how that person looks at the world, and that actually it can be very helpful for a relationship.
All right. Good words to end on. Lots of thank yous in the chat. I'm not going to run through them all, but 12 more people said thank you. So folks, when you exit the Zoom today, make sure to take the feedback survey. Look for an email from me in the next 24 hours with the recording. And next week, we have another career coach coming in to talk to us about best practices for cover letters and resumes. Can never do that topic enough, so that'll be good. So thank you all so much, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day. Thanks again, Shelley.
Thank you.